Okay, good evening, everybody. We have a lot to get through tonight. Things start to get weird tonight. So just this is the sixth Dine and Learn of it's August 12th, 2019 of the summer. So after tonight, there are 2 weeks left. Tonight's dinner is sponsored by the Shuali family, Le'ili Nishmas Harry's father, Mordechai ben Rav Yitzchak. The Neshama should have an aliyah. We're back to fleishigs, except for people who keep the minhag that we talked about last week, that they continue for the rest of the week. Looks like nobody here is at machmir. So let's talk about the Bach. The Bach is a major figure in Halachah. He wrote the commentary on the Torah, which is a standard. His son-in-law was the Taz, who's on the side of Shulchan Aruch. So we all hear about the Bach. Very often we don't paskin like him, but he's in a very important voice. But he wasn't always that way. He was young once. He was born in the 1560s. He learned in the yeshiva in Lublin, and he held the rabbinate in many small towns before he made it big. One of them was Mejbudge. I'm sure I butchered that name, which I think the Rabbi Mendelson has mentioned in the past that the Baal Shem Tov was from Mejbudge, or was in Mejbudge, so therefore he kept some chumrah of the Bach. I don't remember exactly. Maybe he ate Chodesh like the Bach, whatever it was. But he became famous he became world-renowned in 1619 when he was appointed the Rav of Krakow, where he served till the end of his life in 1640. He started publishing his commentary on the Torah in 1530. That's important. It'll become important. So his tshuvas, the Bach, the standard tshuvas of the Bach, now called the Old Bach, were published quickly, I believe, after he passed away. Over a century later, another selection of tshuvas, which had been gathered by his the Taz, his son-in-law, the Taz's stepson. So the step-grandson of the Bach had collected tshuvas by the Bach, to the Bach, by the Taz, to the Taz, and by other great gedolim of that generation.
The Taz is the
son-in-law of the Bach, which would mean any son of the Taz would be his grandson. So this is the step-grandson of the Bach. And that, for whatever reason, didn't get published till the mid-1700s. And then there was another collection that was in the hands of the Tfuel Shor. Somehow got into his hands. And then it got into the hands of Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolios, who I think we spoke about last week or 2 weeks ago. And that got published, I think, around the year 1800. There's a Haskama from the Noda Behuda to that in the year 1800. The Bach passed away in 1640. So that took a long time till it got to press. But they're very important, and they're fascinating. There are clearly editorial changes, because the same tshuva, for whatever reason, is sometimes published in more than one of the books, and they're different. The tshuva we're going to address is bizarre for a number of reasons. It's actually a painful tshuva, and the tshuva Shut Habach HaChadoshos. So that is the third collection published around the year 1800. Siman Membeis, so number 42, is this bizarre and painful tshuva of the Bach to someone named Reb Leib of Lublin. So we don't know who this Reb Leib of Lublin is, and the mystery of tonight is to try to figure out who was this Reb Leib of Lublin after we go through the whole bizarre story. So Reb Leib of Lublin, apparently, the Baal Koreh in the Bach's shul, wherever he was a Rav, we don't exactly know what time period in his life it was. He calls him the Chazan. I suspect it was a Baal Koreh. I don't know if he was actually the Shliach Tzibur who led the davening, but whatever it was, he was at least a Baal Koreh. He went to this Reb Leib of Lublin and said, the Bach put me in cherem, it's not fair. And the Reb Leib of Lublin wrote him a tshuva, sent it to the Bach, saying, I told this guy that doesn't count. And not only that, if he doesn't feel like he wants to lane when you're called to the Torah, that's fine. He doesn't have to lane for you. You don't need to get an aliyah. Very strange. So the Bach writes back to him saying, you clearly only know some of the story. He lied to you. He doesn't say that outright, but it's very clear. Here's the real story. And he goes on and on and on. I have a list of maybe 10 things, maybe more.
What year again is this? What year is the Sefer from?
We don't know. That's the mystery. But we'll have a clue in a few minutes. So the Bach starts off saying something that today we would think is not a big deal. He said, this chazan, he came to me and he complained about the yeshiva curriculum. All they do is they teach Gemara. He says, what they need to teach is Chumash and Tanakh with Trup, because that's what you really need to know in life. It's about Korah. To him, that was the most important thing. So the Bach said, who has a chutzpah like that to complain about the yeshiva curriculum? Okay, Baruch Hashem, nowadays we have much more chutzpah than that. But the Bach said, so this Baal Korah said, why do you need to learn Gemara? We have the Shulchan Aruch now, right? The Shulchan Aruch is published in the 1570s. So he said, we have the Shulchan Aruch now. You don't need Gemara. If you have a question, you just look it up in the Shulchan Aruch. So the Bach said, first of all, that's ridiculous. Second of all, he proved it. From this fascinating, we don't have a tour here, so on my other phone, I'm so modern, I have 2 smartphones. So the tour, he quotes the tour in Orach Chaim, it's a fascinating Beis Yosef. It's bizarre that the Beis Yosef actually says this, I put it in here. So the tour in Siman Tes Zayin, Sechot Tzitzis. So the tour says, what's the minimum size of a talus? So he starts off saying, anything that a katan ben tes, a 9-year-old boy, can cover his head and most of his body, and an adult is not embarrassed to go outside wearing. But if you cannot cover this 9-year-old's head and most of his body, even if an adult will wear it outside, it's pater from tzitzis. It's not obligated in tzitzis. So the Beis Yosef quotes from the Mahari Abuhab. So you might remember from last year, who was this Mahari Abuhab? He was the last Rosh Yeshiva in Spain. In Toledo, he was a Rosh Yeshiva who was the Rebbe of a lot of the people we talked about last year, the Mari Beirav, the Radbaz, the Maharam al-Ashkar. He was the Rebbe of Gedolei Torah. He was not the Rebbe of the Beis Yosef, because the Beis Yosef was about 4 years old at the time of the expulsion, but he was the person the Beis Yosef had always heard about. So the Mahari Abuhab wrote about this tour. He starts to question, so why does the tour even bother saying at the beginning that what is chayav? If the garment can cover the head and the body, most of the body of a 9-year-old, and an adult is not embarrassed to go outside in public wearing it, why does he mention the adult? The adult doesn't even matter here. So he starts to say, well, maybe it's because he wanted to say at the end an adult, and you might have thought that it all depends on the child. What is the child chayav in? But an adult might be chayav on a bigger size talus. So therefore he says, no, he had to say the gadol at the beginning and also at the end. It's a little bit of a complicated pilpul. But then the Mahari Habuhab says, but you know what? Then I took a look in the Gemara. And it's clear in the Gemara that this gadol has nothing to do with it. And it's all about the katan. The Rambam rewrote it in his own language. The Tur combined the language of the Brisa and the Rambam. And therefore, when we look at it, it seems confusing. But if you just look at the Brisa, or if you just look at the Rambam, it's very clear what the Halachah is. And the Beis Yosef adds this final sentence after the Mahari Abuhab. V'kosafti ze l'lamed das l'talmidim. And I wrote this to teach the students. Shelo yemaharu lepalpel b'divrei haposek. You shouldn't start trying to figure out, what going through in detail about the words and being medayik and being very careful in what the posek says. Ad shiyiru makom motzo hadin. First you look at the source. Then you talk about the posek. And this is the Beis Yosef, who also wrote the Shulchan Aruch. And the Bach himself says, the Bach said, look, the Shulchan Aruch himself says, first look at the source in the Gemara, then you can start to figure out what the Sefer means. So this Baal Koreh, who said we don't need to learn Gemara because we have the Shulchan Aruch, he's against the Shulchan Aruch. Baal Koreh was smart. He said, but I know you eat chadash. He said that to the rabbi of the city, the Bach. The Bach is famous for trying to explain the minhag of why we eat chadash. As you know, the grain is forbidden until we bring the korban omer on Pesach, and if not then, until the second day of Pesach. But the minhag, for whatever reason, in Chutz La'aretz is we don't follow that, and we eat any grain anytime. And the Bach has a whole explanation where he suggests that grain raised or grown by Gentiles and Chutz La'aretz is not chayiv in Chodesh. This Baal Koreh did not follow that general minhag. He was stricter. And the truth is, the Bach says everybody eats chadash. But in the Sefer, the last two volumes, the Bach HaChadoshos and the Shut Geone Basroi has tshuvas to the Bach, arguing with him almost immediately from when the Torah was published, from when the Bach was published. We have the Tosfos Yontiv. Tosfos Yontiv, he lived in Prague. He was a student of the Maharal. He demolished the Bach's proofs from the Bach. The Bach replied. We have that also. Said, well, not only that, here's another proof. And then the Tosfos Yontiv replies again. And there are two other tshuvas of people replying. So clearly it was not the case that everybody ate chadash. But the Bach says, look, I showed. So he says 30 years ago, he writes this in the Bach, 30 years ago when I was learning Kiddushin, I decided to figure out this sugya. And I realized there is room to be lenient on chadash. And I wrote it all up. And he copies that in the Bach. And he says, I showed it, or I spoke it over with the Maharal Miprag, Reb Leib Miprag. Well, by the way, Maharal Miprag, why is he called Maharal? His name was Yehuda Levoy, right? If you look in his farm. Why is he not called the Maharil Miprag? Because everybody called him Leib. That was his name, Leib. So he says, I showed it to Reb Leib of Prague, and he agreed. So even though, and if you look in the Tosfos Yontiv's letter to the Bach, the tshuva to the Bach, he never says anything about this comment about the Maharal Miprag. He doesn't say, he's my Rebbe, I know what he said. He didn't agree with you. He doesn't say that. So from there, that silence, I think, is loud. So we're not going to go through all the proofs of the Bach. We're not going to go through actually any of the proofs of the Bach. But what's interesting is that the language in the Torah, almost the language in the Bach that he published in 1530, beginning in 1630, beginning then, is almost word for word in this tshuva. That's almost word for word. That, Shaya, could be a clue. Because if 30 years prior to when he published the Bach, he had written up this sugya, so could be this is from 30 years before 1630, approximately, give or take. And when he wrote it and when he published it probably wasn't the same either. So it could be a little before 1600, a little after 1600, say roughly between 1595 and 1605. So one time the Baal Korah was laning, and he found two words next to each other that did not have the space of a letter in between them. So the din in Shulchan Aruch, right? This guy is so big on the Shulchan Aruch. So the din in Shulchan Aruch is as follows: Yordei Reish Ayin Daled. Sarich shekol os tehei mukefes gvil. Every letter has to have a blank space around it. Ma'arba ruchol seha on all four sides. Shlo tidbag ba'os bechaverta. No two letters are allowed to touch each other. Ela yehi beineim kechut hasara. They have to have at least, a hair's width. There has to be at least some space. Velo yu mufrados harber mizo mizo. They can't be so far apart. Kedei shelo tehei teva achas nires keshtaim. Because you don't want one word to look like two words. If there's a lot of space in between letters in a word, it looks like it's multiple words. The ikar here seems to be it shouldn't look like more than one word. And also he says, in between each word, you have to have the size of a small letter. So the Baal Korah said, I know the Shulchan Aruch says you need to have the size of a small letter between two words. This Sefer Torah doesn't have that size. It's puzzle. Closed it up, returned it, and took out another Sefer. Even though the Bach was saying, no, don't do that. The Rav of the city is saying, no, keep reading. And the guy rolled up the Sefer, put it back in the Aron, and took out another Sefer. The Shulchan Aruch continues. So in between each word, two words, you have to have...
That just to hear line alone is enough, just to have... why was the Bach arguing?
Because the end of the Shulchan Aruch says, "Velo yikarvin beyoser." You can't have two words very close together. Shelo yu shtei tevos niros ka'achas. So it doesn't look like one word. So the Bach says, "Look, okay, fine. They're too close, yes, but they still look like two words. It's kosher. It's good. B'diavad, it's kosher. Keep reading." The guy said no, and he put it back. That's a chutzpah. That's an incredible chutzpah.
He stopped the meat from putting it back. It seems like people massing to this.
Or if you act with confidence, and you're the guy running the show. He was a chazan, or at least a Bakari. He ran the show. And I guess the Bach, what's he going to do? He's going to wrestle the guy to the floor while holding a sefer. There's a limit to what you could do. But we'll get there, though. He did eventually do something. And by the way, this Bach, this tshuva the Bach we're saying, the Shach in Yeridea quotes it. He says that's a halachah. If you should have more space, the space of a small letter, but if you don't, as long as you can tell that they're two words, it's fine. Now, if you remember, a few weeks ago we talked about the case of the Ramah, where there was an orphan who was getting married on Friday, and they couldn't seal the deal until 2 hours into Shabbos. And the Ramah said nobody davens till she gets married. And they did the wedding on Shabbos. They davened, then they had the meal, and everybody danced and celebrated. The same thing happened to the Bach. And it's a tragedy. Look, an orphan girl, what are you supposed to do? So he also said, look, the Ramah is lenient. We'll follow the Ramah. It's in Shulchan Aruch. We'll follow the Ramah. And this Bakari says, look at this rabbi. He doesn't know what he's doing. He did a wedding on Shabbos. So the Bach said, so first of all, what did the Bakari say before? We don't need to learn Gemara because it's in the Shulchan Aruch. He didn't even know Shulchan Aruch. So in the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah says you're allowed to do this. B'shas adchak, you can have a wedding on Shabbos, and that's what the Bach did. And this Bakari was publicly mocking the rabbi, the Bach. Right. Then the Bach adds, okay, this guy is so strict on Chodesh. So if you're strict on Chodesh, you don't eat the bread, you don't eat the crackers, you don't drink the beer. Which means you can't drink beer until after Pesach. Obviously, you can't drink on Pesach, right? So after Pesach, what does this guy do? He goes and drinks beer. And he's getting drunk, and he's walking around town saying lewd things and just acting drunk. All the way through the 3 weeks. And he said to people, I don't need to mourn the Beis HaMikdash. I didn't cause it to be destroyed. Imagine that. Skip a little bit. Parshas Dvarim. Ma'aseh Shahaya in the Shul. The second to last pasuk has the phrase Ba'es Hahi. And it should be spelled Hahu and read, right, there's a Kriyuk Siv, and read Hahi, very common. This particular sefer that he was reading from had it written Ba'es Hahi with a Yud and not a Vav. And the Bakari knew it should have a Vav. Closed up the Sefer Torah, and he's going to return it. And the Bach is saying, no, keep reading. Your 2 psukim left of the Parsha. Finish. It's mutter. And then another rabbi who was sitting down the road said, keep going. It's beferish. Truth is, it's not beferish. It's a big machlokas. What do you do if you have a puzzle Sefer Torah? The Rambam holds you can lane with brachas from a puzzle Sefer Torah. There are many different shitos. Many different shitos. The Shulchan Aruch in Hilchos Kriyas Sefer Torah. So there's a Ramah. This is Siman in Orchaim, Kuf Mem Gimel Sif Dalid. What do you do if you have a puzzle Sefer Torah and you're reading, you find a psal in the Sefer Torah? Im Kfar Karu Imo Shlosha Psukim. If you already read 3 psukim, Ve'ef Shel Hafsik, and you can stop there, meaning it's not within 3 psukim of a parsha. So post Kim Shamu Mavarich Achareha, you stop there, make the bracha. Umashlimu Miminim Sefer Torah Acher Shemot Sin. Take out another Sefer Torah. V'had Motsin Acher Davka Shinim Satos Gomer. And you only take out another Sefer Torah if you have a full, complete mistake. Aval Mishum Chaseres V'Yiseres, but a Vav or a Yud, no, Ein Lahotzi Acher. We don't take out. So it's complicated, different shitos, this and that, many different opinions. And here it's not even exactly a mistake. It's the Kriya, the Ksiv, and it doesn't change the meaning. So the Bach said, I had every right to paskin. Continue reading. So what he said, chutzpanyek. You should be in cherem. Either leave or keep laning. He laid down the law. So the Bach says, I didn't mean he was in cherem. I meant he said so many bad things all along. He acts so badly. He should be in cherem. So based on this, the guy went to Reb Leib of Lublin and complained. So the Bach said, first of all, I was completely in my rights. But let me continue. The Bach says, let me continue telling you some other things that he's done.
The fact that he's just undermining the authority
Yeah.
No, I'm saying isn't that alone enough to...
Right. So the Bach does get to that. The Bach at the end. I don't know why he doesn't start with this.
Right.
Why doesn't he just say, "I'm the rabbi.
Right.
My rule is law"? Who is this guy? He doesn't say that. He eventually does say that, as we get to even more serious psukim, more serious halachas. So let's get so there's just a bizarre machlokas here. This guy was such an amaris. It's really weird. Again, we're only hearing the Bach side of the story, so maybe there is some other explanation for it. So the Gemara in Sota talks about who is not a Talmid Chacham. And this Baal Koreh used to like to quote it. So one opinion the Gemara is one opinion here is Kara v'shana v'lo shimesh tamidei chachamim. If you learned Tanakh and you learned Mishnah, v'lo shimesh tamidei chachamim literally means and you don't have a Rebbe. Rashi says it means you don't learn Gemara, in which they go back and forth. What does it mean? The Mishnah. So that is an Am Haaretz. That's Rabbi Elazar Omer Harez Am Haaretz. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Menachmeni Omer Harez Bur, even lower than Am Haaretz. If you don't learn Gemara and all you learn is Tanakh and Mishnah, you're even lower than that. So continues down. Later the Gemara says there's other opinions. Kara velo shana. You learn Tanakh velo shana. You never learned halachas. Harez Bur. Lo kara velo shana. You didn't learn anything. You didn't learn Tanakh. You didn't learn Mishnah. So Allah because of Amr v'ziresis beis Yisrael v'beis Yehuda zera adam v'zera behema. You're not even a mensch. So you didn't even learn Torah. Obviously, if it's not your fault, so not your fault. But this Baal Koreh had a different girsa, or he made up his own girsa, which he says not kara v'lo shana. You learn Tanakh, but you don't learn Mishnah. That you're a bor. Says if you look shana v'lo kara, if you learn Mishnah but you didn't learn Tanakh, you're the bor. You're the lowest of the lowest. So he says, that's most of the rabbis nowadays. They know Gemara, they know Mishnah, they don't know Tanakh. They can't open a Sefer Torah and start reading with the trup and the nekudos like I can. Fine, they can lane. You open up a chumash, you can lane. Everybody who had a bar mitzvah could do that. But I could do it. I take out a Sefer Torah. That's what it means. Kara v'lo shana. And he brings a raya from Gemara and Kiddushin. If you mekadesh a woman, right? You marry a woman on condition that you are a karyana. You are Baal Koreh. You're someone who knows how to read. Karyana means you're literate. So you are you married or not? How do you prove, or what's the minimum amount of someone who is considered literate? So Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Meir says, Kevan shekara shlosha psukim beveis hakneses, as long as you can read 3 psukim in shul, harez mekudeshes. It means you're literate and she's married. So says the Baal Koreh, see, you have to read it in shul. What does it mean reading in shul? With a trup. If you can't read it in shul with trup, you're illiterate. The Bach says that's, first of all, that's not the actual language of the Gemara that we have. The language of the Gemara have is reversed. Shana v'lo kara. Who heard this other girsa?
How do you expect him to know that?
Yeah, right. And so second of all, we don't even paskin like this Rabbi Meir. We paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, that you have to be able to read and translate it. So that has nothing to do with laning and trup. It has to do with understanding it. If you can read and understand it, then you're literate. So it's all very weird. He's just trying to prop himself up as a Baal Koreh. You know, I'm a Baal Koreh, therefore that's all that's important. And he says, so Rabbeinu Tam, the Gemara says you have to split your time of learning 3 ways, right? 1/3 Tanakh, 1/3 Mishnah, 1/3 and 1/3 Gemara. So Rabbeinu Tam says, how come we don't do that nowadays in our yeshivas? So he says, because it's all in Gemara. If you learn Gemara, you also learn Mishnah, you also learn Tanakh. So it says the Bach, whoever heard when you're learning Gemara, you have to, whenever you get to a pasuk, you have to lane it. That's Kara. 1/3 for Mikra, 1/3 for Kara. So who says, we never heard of such a thing, that you have to lane it with a trup. He says, the laning with a trup, that's only when you're in shul, or when you're doing Shnai Mikra. He says, when you're doing Shnai Mikra, you have to use a trup. But not in Gemara, it says, he's against Rishonim, he doesn't understand what he's talking about. So halavai, that should be the worst that he did. So one time, the Bach had a policy. When there's worms on a lung, right? In those days, they shechted, you took your chicken, you took your animal to the shochet, he shechted it, and then he checked the lungs. So if there are holes in a lung, that's bad. That means it's treif. But what if there are worms there? So the worms probably made the hole. So Gemara, if the worms made the hole, so then it's not because the animal had any disease, it's because the worms got into this dead animal and caused it after he was dead. So Bach, and this is how we hold halacha, said that's only if the worms are in the hole. If you see a worm coming out of a hole, you can assume he made it. But if there are just worms on the lung, who said the worm made the hole in the lung? So he said it's treif. If there are holes in the lung, even if there are worms there, it's treif. And that's the normal psak halacha. This Baal Koreh went to the shochet and he said, no, that's kosher. Everybody could eat.
So again, if there's worms there and there's no...
And there are holes. There are holes.
Right.
So the Baal Koreh said, well, they're worms, so they probably made the holes. It's kosher. But we don't paskin like that. We only paskin if we know for sure the worms are coming through the hole. So this Baal Koreh literally, first of all, he disagreed with the rabbi on an issue of kashrus, and second of all, he went against normative halacha based on his own svara. Within the lung, so there's a tube in the animal's lung. There's a tube that's called the varda. It's a big machlokas. What happens if that varda looks strange, different color, bent out of shape, or moved in the wrong place? It's very unclear how to paskin. There's a big machlokas rishonim, and the Ramah says a minhag in Ashkenaz is ramachmir anytime the varda looks strange. That's a minhag. That's a standard minhag in Ashkenaz. The Baal Koreh said, "You guys can eat it. It's on my shoulders." He said that. It's on my shoulders. You're allowed to eat that. It's Pella. Who could say that? And there's a guy who says you don't need to learn Gemara because it's all in Shulchan Aruch, and he doesn't even follow the Shulchan Aruch. Maybe he doesn't even know it. The Bach adds, and if you want to make it even worse, he doesn't wear tefillin on Chol HaMoed. Right, so to us, we kind of laugh about that. But that's because we live in a community where there's no minhag. But if you lived in Poland, where there was one minhag, the whole city, everybody wore tefillin, and this one guy comes to shul with no tefillin, that's lo sisko to do. That's the real problem. Okay, so we're almost out of time. The question is, who is this Reb Leib of Lublin? So I mentioned before, why was he called the Maharal mi Prague? Because his name was Reb Leib, and he lived in Prague. He did not always live in Prague. So in 1573, the Maharal moved to Prague, and he opened a yeshiva. He was not the Rav of Prague, he opened a yeshiva. 1578, he published his first sefer, Gur Aryeh. 1582, he published Gvuras Hashem. 1583, the Av Bezdin of Prague died, and Maharal's brother-in-law was appointed to the position. And so the Maharal left. He went to Posen in Poland, where he became the Av Bezdin and the Rosh Yeshiva in Posen. So that was 1583. 1588, the Maharal returned to Prague, again as a Rosh Yeshiva, private citizen, not as a Rav. 1589, he published Derech HaChaim, right, his commentary on Pirkei Avos. 1592, this is interesting, he was invited to speak to the Kaiser Rudolf II. And that year he left. He left Vienna. He left Prague, he left Austria, and he went back to Poland. So that the Lavush at that point becomes the Rav of Prague. And here's what we know next. And it's not so clear. Sometime around 1598 or 1599, the Lavush leaves to Posen. And sometime around 1599 and 1600, the Maharal comes back to Prague, becomes a Rav, and serves there till the end of his life. So what happened in that short period, 1598 to 1600? It's not clear. When did the Bach start publishing his commentary on the Torah? Around the year 1630. Subtract 30 years. So when did he write his whole analysis of Chadash? Around the year 1600, give or take. So around that time, the Maharal was the Rav of Prague. Was not the Rav of Prague. Was not the Rav of Posen. Maybe he was the Rav of Lublin. I saw an article in the journal Hamayan about 10 years ago that made that suggestion. Maybe he was the Rav of Lublin. So maybe the Reb Leib, who the Bach is complaining to, saying you're too far away, you don't know the circumstances, maybe that was a Maharal mi Prague. And there are other tshuvas, and on Chadash, in the Bach, he says, I told the Maharal of Prague my whole shtickle Torah on Chadash, and he didn't disagree. So maybe this is the case. Maybe this tshuva is when he told the Maharal of Prague his whole shtickle Torah on Chadash, and the Maharal consented. And interesting enough, in 1599, we don't know where he was, but the Maharal of Prague published his Tiferes Yisrael. Tiferes Yisrael is all about Shavuos and Matan Torah, Maimon Har Sinai. One parak is out of place there. Parak Samach Zayin. He talks about a Sefer Torah that is missing letters, and his conclusion is if it doesn't change the meaning, it's fine. You can keep reading, just like the Bach. So maybe that was due to the exchange with the Bach. I don't know. I don't buy it. It's very far-fetched, very circumstantial. Who says that Maharal was ever in Lublin? Who says that? And it's not that the Bach wrote a tshuva 30 years before he published the Bach. No, he was learning Kiddushin 30 years before, and he wrote a Peshichel Torah, and who probably copied it into his tshuva from his notes, just like he copied into the Bach from his notes. The tshuvas of the Bach. So I checked. There's a biography of the Bach in English, published by Rabbi Elijah Shochet. This is one of the first books that I personally published. I republished his book. I had it approved by my poskim. We published it. He makes a point. He went through all the tshuvas, and he saw almost all of them, nearly all of them, were come from after 1619 when he was the Rav of Krakow. One tshuva he found from the year 1600. Nothing before then. So it's a little far-fetched to assume this one tshuva, this really long one, is from the year 1599 or 1600. It's a little bit of a stretch. So who was Reb Leib of Lublin? I don't know. The Rav of Lublin. Reb Leib. I don't know. Okay. Shkach. So Mir Hashem will continue next week.